The universe has a way of returning kindness when we least expect it. For Mark Daniels, a struggling single father of two, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at a bus stop when he offered his umbrella to a sobbing stranger. Little did he know that this simple act would change the course of his life forever. If you've ever wondered whether good deeds truly matter in our chaotic world, this story might just restore your faith in humanity. Stay with me until the end, I promise it's worth it. And if this story touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Mark Daniels hadn't planned on being a single father. At 34, he had imagined a different life, one where he and his wife Sarah would raise their children together in the small 3-bedroom house they had purchased with such hope. But life rarely follows our carefully laid plans. 3 years ago, Sarah had complained of headaches. 2 months later, she was gone, an aggressive brain tumor that gave them barely enough time to say goodbye. Since then, Mark had been doing his best to raise 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Liam while working as an accountant at a small firm that barely paid enough to cover their mortgage and the astronomical childcare costs. His parents helped when they could, but they lived 2 states away and had their own health issues to manage. Most days, Mark felt like he was drowning, barely keeping his head above water as he juggled work deadlines, school pickups, grocery shopping, and the emotional needs of 2 children who still sometimes cried for their mother at night. That Tuesday had been particularly brutal. His boss had criticized his work on a major client account, Emma had forgotten her science project at home, requiring Mark to rush it to school during his lunch break, and Liam had woken up with a low-grade fever that the daycare wouldn't accept. After calling in favors from a neighbor to watch Liam for the afternoon, Mark had barely made it through the rest of his workday before rushing to catch the bus that would take him to Emma's school for pickup. The sky had opened up just as he reached the bus stop, a sudden downpour that seemed to mirror his mood. Mark had an umbrella. He always kept one in his messenger bag after being caught unprepared too many times, but the day's frustrations had left him feeling numb to the rain soaking through his jacket. That's when he noticed her. She sat alone on the bench, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Dark hair clung to her face, and mascara tracked down her cheeks in thin black rivers. She wore a professional outfit, a navy blazer and pencil skirt, but her composure had clearly crumbled. Something about her reminded him of Sarah in those final weeks, that same look of someone fighting a battle they weren't sure they could win. Mark hesitated only briefly before approaching her. "Excuse me," he said softly, extending his umbrella over her head. "You look like you could use this more than I do." The woman looked up, startled by the sudden shelter from the rain. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, but there was something striking about them, a deep amber color that seemed to hold both strength and vulnerability. "I'm fine," she said automatically, though her voice cracked on the second word. Mark offered a gentle smile. "No offense, but you don't look fine. And that's okay. None of us are fine all the time." He gestured to the empty space beside her. "Mind if I sit? The bus won't be here for another 10 minutes. She hesitated, then nodded, shifting slightly to make room. Mark sat down, still holding the umbrella over both of them now. "I'm Mark," he said, not expecting a response. "Elena," she replied after a moment, wiping at her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Bad day?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Elena laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "Bad year, more like it." She shook her head. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about my problems. Sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger," Mark said. "No judgment, no history, no expectations." Elena looked at him for a long moment, as if assessing whether he was sincere. Whatever she saw in his face must have convinced her, because she took a deep breath and began to speak. "I just lost my job," she said. "Budget cuts," they said. "But I know it's because I've missed too many days taking care of my mother. She has Alzheimer's, and her condition has been deteriorating rapidly. The care facility costs more than I can afford now, especially without health insurance." She gestured to a manila envelope clutched in her hand. I just came from meeting with the facility director. They're giving me 30 days to find alternative arrangements or pay the outstanding balance. Mark felt a pang of recognition in his chest. He knew what it was like to have the rug pulled out from under you, to feel like you were failing the people who depended on you most. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. That's a lot to handle all at once. Elena nodded, seeming surprised by his genuine concern. What about you? She asked, clearly trying to shift the focus away from herself. You look like you've had your share of rough days too. Mark considered deflecting but found himself wanting to be honest with this stranger. Single dad, he said simply. 2 kids. Their mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. Elena's expression softened. I'm so sorry. We manage, Mark said with a shrug that belied the daily struggle. My daughter has her mom's smile, and my son has her laugh. Sometimes it's like having little pieces of her still with us. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the rain drumming against the umbrella above them. When Elena spoke again, her voice was steadier. Thank you, she said. For the umbrella. And for listening. Anytime, Mark replied, though he assumed he'd never see her again. The bus arrived then, its brakes squealing as it pulled up to the curb. Mark stood and offered Elena his hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers cold against his palm. You should keep this, he said, pressing the umbrella into her hands. Looks like the rain isn't letting up anytime soon. Elena started to protest, but Mark shook his head. I have another at home, he lied. Besides, you have a longer journey ahead of you today. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of shared struggle and resilience. Elena nodded, accepting the umbrella. Thank you, Mark, she said again, and this time there was a warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before. They boarded the bus together but sat separately. Mark watched as Elena got off 3 stops before his, the red umbrella bobbing among the sea of pedestrians until she disappeared from view. He thought about her situation during the rest of his ride, wondering if there was something more he could have done. But with his own precarious finances and the constant demands on his time, offering an umbrella and a sympathetic ear was all he could manage. By the time he picked up Emma from her after-school program and collected Liam from the neighbor's house, the encounter at the bus stop had faded to the background of his mind, replaced by the immediate concerns of dinner preparation, homework supervision, and bedtime routines. The next few days passed in their usual blur of activity. Mark's boss continued to be demanding. Emma had a dance recital that required a costume Mark had to hastily assemble from items around the house, and Liam's fever developed into a full-blown cold that kept him home for 2 days. Mark used up precious sick days to care for his son, knowing that his job security was becoming increasingly tenuous. It was Friday evening, nearly 4 days after the encounter at the bus stop, when Mark's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was yet another telemarketer, but something made him accept the call. Is this Mark Daniels? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is he, Mark replied cautiously. Mr. Daniels, my name is Rebecca Torres. I'm calling from Westside Medical Center. We have a patient here, Elena Vasquez, who has listed you as her emergency contact. Mark's brow furrowed in confusion. There must be some mistake. I barely know Ms. Vasquez. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She was quite insistent, sir. She was brought in after collapsing at her mother's care facility. She's stable now, but she's asking to see you. Mark glanced at his children, who were engrossed in a board game on the living room floor. His babysitter options were limited, especially on such short notice, but something about the situation tugged at him. He remembered Elena's tear-streaked face, the weight of responsibility she carried for her mother. I'll be there as soon as I can arrange care for my children, he told the nurse. An hour later, after dropping the kids off with Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who occasionally watched them in emergencies, Mark found himself walking through the sliding doors of Westside Medical Center. The antiseptic smell hit him immediately, bringing back unwelcome memories of Sarah's final days. He pushed the thoughts aside and approached the information desk. Elena was in a private room on the third floor. When Mark knocked softly on the door frame, she turned toward him, surprise and relief washing over her pale face. "You came," she said, her voice raspy. Mark stepped into the room, feeling awkward but concerned. "The nurse said you collapsed. Are you okay?" Elena attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Exhaustion and dehydration, apparently. I've been trying to work overtime at a temporary job while sorting out my mother's situation. Guess my body decided to remind me I'm not superhuman." Mark pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat down. "Why did you list me as your emergency contact? We met once, for 10 minutes. Elena looked down at her hands, which were fidgeting with the edge of the hospital blanket. "I don't have anyone else," she admitted quietly. "My father died years ago. No siblings. Most of my friends drifted away when my mother's care started taking up all my time. And there was something about you." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "You were kind when you didn't have to be. That's rare these days." The simplicity of her explanation hit Mark hard. He knew what it was like to feel alone in a crisis, to wish for just one person who understood. "What about your mother?" he asked gently. "Does she know you're here?" Elena shook her head. "She wouldn't understand. Her lucid moments are becoming fewer and farther between." Her voice caught. "The facility called me yesterday to say they're accelerating their timeline. They want her out by next week unless I can pay the outstanding balance in full." "How much is it?" Mark asked before he could stop himself. $8,000, Elena replied, the number hanging heavy in the air between them. "Plus I need to find a new place that will take her with her condition, which means more deposits, more fees." She closed her eyes briefly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have involved you in this. I just panicked when they asked for an emergency contact." Mark reached out and squeezed her hand. "It's okay. I'm glad you called." And to his surprise, he meant it. They talked for nearly an hour. Elena told him about her mother, a former literature professor who had instilled in Elena a love of books and learning. She described how devastating it had been to watch her brilliant mother's mind deteriorate, how she sometimes still caught glimpses of the woman who had raised her during rare moments of clarity. Mark shared stories about Emma and Liam, about the challenges of being both mother and father to them, about his fears that he wasn't enough. When a nurse came in to check Elena's vitals and inform them that visiting hours were ending soon, Mark realized he needed to get back to his children. "I should go," he said, standing reluctantly. "But I'd like to check on you tomorrow, if that's okay?" Elena nodded, looking both grateful and slightly embarrassed. "You don't have to." "I know," Mark replied. "I want to." As he drove home, Mark couldn't stop thinking about Elena's situation. He knew what it was like to face an impossible financial burden while trying to care for loved ones. When Sarah was sick, the medical bills had piled up despite their insurance. He'd nearly lost the house before his parents had stepped in with their modest retirement savings. Even now, he was just one major expense away from financial disaster. The next day, Saturday, Mark brought Emma and Liam with him to visit Elena. He had explained the situation to them as best he could, that they were going to visit a new friend who wasn't feeling well and could use some company. The children, with their natural openness, had immediately embraced the idea of cheering up someone in need. Elena's face lit up when she saw them enter her hospital room. Emma had insisted on bringing a small bouquet of daisies they had picked from their garden, and Liam had drawn a picture of what appeared to be a rainbow-colored cat, though he insisted it was a get-better tiger. "These are for you," Emma said solemnly, presenting the flowers. "And this," Liam added, thrusting his artwork toward Elena with pride. Elena accepted both gifts with genuine delight. "These are beautiful," she said, examining Liam's drawing with appropriate seriousness. "Is this a special tiger?" Liam nodded enthusiastically. "It's a magic tiger. It makes people feel better." "Well, I do feel better already," Elena told him, and the smile she gave Mark over the children's heads was warm with gratitude. They stayed for nearly 2 hours. The children, initially shy, quickly warmed to Elena, especially when she revealed that she knew several stories by heart, stories her mother had read to her as a child. She captivated them with a tale about a brave knight who discovered that his true strength came not from his sword but from his kindness. As they were preparing to leave, a doctor came in to inform Elena that she would be discharged the following morning. "That's good news," Mark said, but Elena's expression remained troubled. "Yes," she agreed, though her tone lacked conviction. After sending the children to wait in the hallway, Mark turned back to Elena. "What's wrong?" Elena sighed. "I'm supposed to meet with the care facility director tomorrow afternoon. Without the money or an alternative placement for my mother, I don't know what's going to happen." Mark hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even himself. "Why don't you come stay with us for a few days? Just until you get back on your feet. We have a spare room, it's small, but it's private." Elena stared at him in disbelief. "Mark, you barely know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. "You're someone who needs help, and I'm in a position to offer it. Besides, the kids already like you." After some persuasion, Elena reluctantly agreed, though she insisted it would only be for a day or two while she figured out her next steps. The following day, Mark picked Elena up from the hospital and brought her to his home. The spare room was indeed small. It had once been Sarah's home office, but Mark and the children had spent the morning cleaning it and making it as welcoming as possible. Emma had insisted on putting a small vase of flowers on the dresser, and Liam had placed his magic tiger drawing on the wall. "It's perfect," Elena said when they showed her the room, and though Mark knew it was far from perfect, he appreciated her graciousness. That evening, they shared a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, one of the few meals Mark had mastered over the years. The conversation flowed easily, with the children eagerly sharing stories about school and their friends. Elena listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. For the first time in a long while, the house felt full of warmth and laughter. After the children were in bed, Mark and Elena sat in the living room with cups of tea. Elena had returned from her meeting with the care facility director looking defeated. "They won't budge on the timeline," she said quietly. "My mother needs to be moved by Friday, or they'll transfer her to a state facility." Mark winced. He had heard stories about the state facilities, understaffed, overcrowded, with minimal personal attention for patients. "What about other private facilities?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "I've called every place within a 50-mile radius. Without insurance and with her condition, no one will take her without a substantial deposit. And even if they did, I can't afford the monthly fees now that I've lost my job." Mark hesitated, then spoke the thought that had been forming in his mind since the previous day. What if we found a way to keep her where she is, just until you can get back on your feet?" Elena looked at him skeptically. "Unless you have $8,000 hidden under your mattress, I don't see how that's possible." Mark took a deep breath. "I don't. But I do have something that might be worth close to that." He stood and walked to the bookshelf in the corner of the room, reaching for a small wooden box on the top shelf. He brought it back to the couch and opened it, revealing a delicate diamond pendant on a platinum chain. "This was Sarah's," he explained softly.